You're listening to All Things Real Estate on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN. Once again, here's your hosts, Gary Kelley and Brad Avergon.
Welcome back to the second half of All Things Real Estate. I'm Gary Kelley from Lamakia Realty, and I am joined by the illustrious
Brad Avergon with Envision Bank and Mortgage.
And right before the break, Brad, we were talking about FHA appraisal and inspection and that kind of thing. And you were pointing out how the FHA appraisal, while it may be more stringent because they're looking for certain things like a missing hand railing, broken glass, that kind of stuff, it's not a home inspection.
Not in any way, shape, or form, Gary, and it shouldn't be misconstrued as such. It's a mistake to do so.
I've had homes where there's peeling paint, and all the owner had to do was scrape it off, put some shellac on, and it was considered fine then. Or I had another house where it was a dual pane window. One of the panes had a crack in it, and that was bad. So all we had to do was take that entire pane out. So instead of having a dual pane window, you had a single pane window, but no broken glass. And that was okay. That's not the same as a home inspection, where the home inspector goes around, spends some amount of time, I'm going to say 3 hours, and they literally check every outlet, poking the sills, and that kind of stuff. The appraisal tends to be in, out, no one gets hurt.
Absolutely, Gary. When you're talking about an appraisal, even in a stringent appraisal like an FHA appraisal, they're looking at cosmetic things that are on their face and visible to the eye, versus, in my opinion, a home inspection bears a lot more importance, because you could be dealing with a very, very expensive item like a boiler or a furnace or an HVAC system or a number of things, or even some of the refrigerators now go for $2,500 if that's included. So not that there's ever any guarantee with a home inspection, but at least you know what you're buying and you know what you're going in for. If the home inspector comes and says, "Hey, this boiler is probably got another couple of years life," or the roof, that's another thing. An FHA and appraiser is not going to pick up on the life of a roof, versus a good home inspector is going to be able to pick up on that and say, "Look, you can expect an 8 to 20, depending on the size of the house, $8,000 to $20,000 expense this many years down the road, and you need to be able to budget for that." Or the roof is fine, it looks like a brand new roof, you're in great shape. But you need to know. I think those are important items, because they're big ticket items that if a buyer were to have to bear the brunt of those things shortly thereafter closing, can be expensive.
It's interesting. As you go through and you talk to different folks, one of the things when someone looks at me and says, "Well, I don't have a loan officer," it's like someone coming up and saying, "Brad, do you have a cardiologist?" You may not have a loan officer. So how does someone go about finding a loan officer?
That's a great question. I think the best way to find a loan officer is to get a personal referral. I mean, that's how I've worked for the last 34 years. I've built a reputation. So all of my business is referred to me personally. I think a really good question to ask a loan officer that you're considering is, number one, how long have they been in the business? Is this somebody that's gotten in the last year or two, where they pretty much were familiar with the refinance business, but a purchase transaction is a very, very different transaction. The other question to ask is, what sort of relevant personal experience do they have? Have they purchased homes? Have they built homes? Have they rehabbed homes? So that they can really aid in advising the client. That's one of the biggest things that I think people don't understand that a loan officer does. I view myself more as like a Sherpa, guiding them through the process, working hand in hand with the realtor such as yourself to help them get the property that they want. And that commitment to the client, I think, is what makes a big distinction. And accessibility, that's another question too. How accessible? Are you accessible nights? Are you accessible weekends? Or does it come 5 o'clock and you're gone? Or once you're done with your pre-letter, it gets sent down the line to somebody else. You need that type of relationship with someone, because quite frankly, there's a lot of questions that come up in the home buying process, and you want that advisor there to help.
I believe in accessibility being important. I've worked with a lot of local lenders such as yourself, and there's something to be said for picking up the phone and being able to reach someone when you have a question, or if you're in the middle of, writing an offer on a Saturday night and you want to have clarity on something. Sometimes the people that are working at the, I'm going to call them the 800 number mortgage companies, they don't work on the weekends. Some of them. This is, these are all generalities. I know if I call you, I'll get an answer, or you'll say, "Hey, I can't really talk right now. Can you call me back?" And that's fine too. Um, the same thing with attorneys. We work with an attorney, David Jaime, who is generally accessible. He doesn't want to be on a long-winded phone call, but if you have a quick question, he'll take it. There are other attorneys. It's like 5 o'clock. You can hear their laptops shutting, and they don't return till sometime on Monday. Yeah, I need someone that's going to be more accessible to when my clients need to have an answer, not necessarily what their schedule is. And I think that that's a big difference. Brad, in this day and age, how often do you have someone coming into your office?
Not as certainly not as often as I did a number of years ago. I think, throughout the whole COVID thing, people just came in less and less. But I'm happy to meet with people in person if they wish to. But I think with technology, it's been our friend. So I often will Zoom with clients, oftentimes after they've put the kids to bed. So it's 9 o'clock at night where you wouldn't find me in the office necessarily, but I could do a Zoom, and we can all sit down and have a chat and answer all their questions in a really relaxed environment. So I think that's one of the good things that kind of come out of this COVID thing, is that we can use technology to our advantage. Less and less people are coming into the office for various reasons, most of it being scheduling, you know.
Yep.
But I think it's worked out well.
So I'm going to ask you a question, and this is awkward, okay? And I'm going to put you on the spot. You know that I have this little soundbite where I say to people, getting a mortgage is going to be a game. You have to play it like a game. You have to play it like they're going to throw hurdles up at you and you have to knock them down and you're going to win the game. Okay? Kind of like Bill Belichick. It doesn't matter what the question was yesterday. We got the question now. We'll play the game tomorrow. Why is it sometimes that it appears like the hurdles are just so frequent and so many and so high? Why is that?
So there's a number of reasons for that. But one of the big reasons that came out, and we're seeing some loosening going on right now, but when COVID hit, within 2 months to 3 months after COVID hitting, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who are the kind of the rule makers in our industry, they set the standard in our industry that all lenders have to abide by in order to make those loans as what's called marketable, okay, or QM loans, okay. So they changed the rules, and the reason that they changed the rules is because many companies, self-employed individuals specifically, were shut down for a period of anywhere from 60 days to 6 months or more. And so looking at the previous year's tax returns, for example, was not sufficient, right? If I was looking at the 2019 tax returns, the tax, halfway through 2020, those numbers were significantly different. They'd been shut down. So they required things like profit and losses and letters from CPAs and different things like that. And so it became much more stringent based on the guidelines and the overlays. That's an example of a financial thing that happened. Another thing that happened not too long ago is where they had the tornadoes that came through, like the Sturbridge area. Well, that area was declared a very, very disaster area, for lack of a better term. And so there was an additional requirement of what are the conditions of those properties now? What do they look like now? If you had anything that was in process, we had to send another inspector back out there to make sure that the properties were still standing. And was there any structural damage or anything like that? If there's any indication of structural damage when an appraiser goes through, so for example, like say a garage, there's a detached garage and the garage is leaning. Well, we don't want a small child walking into that garage and the garage crushing that child, or anybody for that matter. Forget the child, could be anybody. And so we want to make sure the properties are structurally sound so that our clients, when they get into them, are not going to be in. So those are two examples. But the quick answer is this. The underwriters set the guidelines. The Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac set the guidelines. The underwriters enforce those guidelines. That's their job. So depending on how they interpret those guidelines, They have a job to make sure that those loans meet those guidelines in order for them to be safe, sound, and marketable.
And the loan officer is the punching bag. You're not the one actually making those decisions. It's the people behind the curtain.
That is absolutely true. But as a loan officer, again, I've been doing this for 34 years. I ask, and I tell my clients right up front, I said, listen, I'm not trying to be nosy. I'm trying to get a lot of information up front. I'm going to ask you for a lot of information well before you start looking for a property. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to streamline the process. I don't want those clients to feel like they're being, bleeded out with the extra documentation along the way. So I try to kind of illustrate what the process is going to look like, what I'm gathering up front, and what they're going to have to supply down the road.
Brad, we've got basically a little bit over a minute to go. My question to you is, are you a good loan officer, and why?
That's a great question. I think I'm a great loan officer, and why? I think I'm a great loan officer because, number one, I'm accessible to my clients. I view myself as a Sherpa to guide them through the process and help them get the home that they're trying to get by working with people like you, Gary, by working with the attorney, and making sure that the client is not put in a situation where they're going to be in danger, where they could lose their deposit, where they're going to be frustrated by going through a process on a home that they're not going to get because they don't qualify. So taking that time up front, doing that due diligence up front that I don't get compensated for, that's my commitment to my client, so that when they're done with the process, they're so happy with the process that they feel compelled to let everybody know they know that they work with the Gary, Brad team and David Jaime team. So that's the goal, the client.
That's the goal. See, my goal is just to help people. And if I help people and help them with their real estate goals and all that, then, real estate happens. And that's, at the end of the day, we want people to say, you were really helpful to us and made a difference and helped us with something where, we don't do it often. Brad, if someone wants to reach you, how do they reach you?
Best way to reach me, Gary, is via my cell phone, which is 978-375-5531, or my email, which is bavergon@envisionbank.com. And Gary, what's the best way to reach you?
I can be reached at 508-733-6005 or Gary at movewithgary.com. I'm Gary Kelley with Lamakia. That's Brad Avergon with Envision Bank and Mortgage. We'll talk to you again. Thanks, Brad.
Be well.
You've been listening to All Things Real Estate on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN.